Excuse me. All right, Noreen, just let me.
Go ahead.
George, we're ready to start. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to the Town of Monroe Planning Board meeting for January 19th, 2021. I'd like to welcome everyone here to our first meeting in Town Hall here in Monroe. And let's just start with a roll call, if I may. Jason?
Here.
Manson here.
Here.
Okay, with that, just like to point out fire exits. In the back of the hall are fire exits. Also, if you come out the door here, there's a fire exit immediately on your left, through the double doors on the right, or if absolutely necessary, all the way down the long hall, make the right and right out the door. Also, if it's your first time here in Town Hall, restrooms are located down that same long hallway. Make the right, and they're on the right as well. If I can ask everyone to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, God, in addition to this being our first regular meeting of the year, it's also our reorganization meeting, so we have a little bit of housekeeping to do first. So our first point of business is we need to have a motion to appoint a acting chair in the event that our chairperson, Bonnie Franson, is not here. May I have a motion and a nomination?
I'll nominate you, Jeff.
Thank you. May I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any other nominations? Okay, then we'll vote by roll call as well.
Trawinsky, aye.
Manson, aye.
Carroll, aye.
Wade, aye.
Thank you. Next, I need a motion to, if I can have a motion to have that the Planning Board of the Town of Monroe appoints Ashley Torrey of Burke, Mealy, Golden, and Naughton, LLP, as our Planning Board Attorney for 2021. Thank you.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Jason. And a roll call vote.
Trawinsky, aye.
Manson, aye.
Carroll, aye.
Wade, aye.
Thank you. I'd also like a motion that the Planning Board of the Town of Monroe hereby appoints Sean Arnott of McGooey, Hauser, and Etzel Consulting Engineers as the Planning Board Engineer for 2021.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Trawinsky, aye.
Manson, aye.
Carroll, aye.
Wade, aye.
Thank you. Okay, and then finally, before moving on to projects, we have our calendar for the year. So, much like we've been doing for the last several years, we're looking at having our workshop meeting on the second Thursday, and our regular meeting on the on the third Tuesday, with appropriate applicant submittal dates. We'll also continue to have our technical review meetings, and those will be on Fridays. Is that across the board?
Friday of the month.
Second Friday of the month. Thank you very much, Noreen. Any comments about that? Any questions? Okay, if I can ask then that we vote and enact these calendars. Roll call vote.
Trawinsky, aye.
Manson, aye.
Wade, aye.
Made the motion, Jeff, you?
Carroll,
Yeah,
aye.
sure.
Seconded.
Thank you.
Roll call, be
Yeah, you're right, I didn't. Sorry, may I have a second for that motion that we just
I'll
approved?
second.
Thank you.
Truinski, aye.
Manson, aye.
Carroll, aye.
Slade, aye.
Thank you very much. Okay, now moving on to the business of our meeting. Our first applicant is DG Management. Oh, okay,
Testing?
that's good.
Okay.
All right, good evening. If, again, one more time, you'll remind us who you are and what you're representing. Give us a little update on where we're at this point, please.
Good evening, everyone. John Queenan from Lankin Tully Engineering, engineer for the applicant. We're here before you with a project I think has been here for quite some time. DG Realty Management. It's a cluster subdivision along Orico Terrace for 15 units. We were last before the board in December, where we had some discussions of the overall layout. And I think one of the main items that came out of the meeting in December was there was a question whether the duplex units proposed fell under the definition of multiple group or multiple residence definition of the town. I did some research. I did talk to the board's consultants, Sean and Ashley. We reviewed that. I did do an updated plan, and I think ultimately from those discussions, it was found that a duplex unit does meet the definition of a multiple group use within a cluster, provided that we meet the other provisions of the clustering, meaning that each side of the duplex, so the duplex would have to be a minimum of 15,000 square foot lot, because each one would have to be on a 7,500 square foot lot. So we did some shifting of the subdivision, really minor things that occurred, and I did send a map to Sean and Ashley for their quick review of it, and it does look like that we can certainly meet that. It was basically, some of the lots was a single family, we swapped it with another lot to make it a double. There wasn't an increase in units, it was just placement of single family versus the duplex units up there. We are currently in the final design stages of doing the road grading. We have building footprints now from architectural. We also will be providing renderings at our next meeting, as well as a full landscaping plan for the project. So I'm tying all these loose ends together to give you basically a complete package at this point. So that's pretty much where we're up to. I also think in December, the lead agency notification was complete, and I'm not sure if 30 days has come and gone. I think it has. But our next steps that we're looking at is, once we do this final design, we'd like to move forward with our water. We're doing wells for each lot. We're putting together a protocol for the board's review before we do that testing. We will have to drill 2 wells up there to meet the health department requirements for testing. But we're putting together a well testing protocol for your review and whoever the board's consultant's review is. We have prepared and submitted application to Orange County Sewer District Number 1 for the proposed sewer mains. And ultimately, we'll need to begin the seeker process. So if there's any other studies or aspects that we're missing, I'd like to try to hammer that out tonight so we can get them in line and moving to get those completed for you.
Okay, before we move on to the consultants, anyone on the board just have any clarifying questions for John at this point, based on what he reviewed with us?
I have a question. It's about the mixing of duplex with single family. It was discussed, I think lightly, may have been entertained, but I don't know if the entire board was polled for that. It's not reflected in the minutes. And I was wondering if we could poll the board so we have a direction if we're going with.
I would guess before we do that, the question would be, are you talking about board's preference, or are you talking about whether that's something that we would want to move forward with? I mean, Ashley, if I may, based on what I gathered from what John said, if it meets the other standards of the clustering, then it would be a permissible use.
Yes, so it could be something that's approved as part of a cluster in this district. So I know there was some talk about this at the last meeting, and this has been a plan that the applicants put forth for a little bit now. You approved back in, when you did the maximum yield resolution, you set the actual number of units. And this is the layout that was then developed from that, rather than having 15 separate single-family homes, they proposed a mix of the two-family and single-family. So that's what's been advancing to this point. I don't know if the board has anything else to add on that. I know that it's been discussed a little bit amongst the board. I thought there was a preference made known at the last.
Yeah, if I could, I thought at the last meeting we went through and the board was in agreement that as long as it met the definition, that this was the plan that was in general agreement.
I do know that was, one of the questions that night was, that we were trying to narrow down the definition and see whether that really worked. But so from what we're seeing, from what John stated, that does fit the definition
Yes, so
as long as,
Other requirements of there has to be a common area retained by the HOA for the exclusive benefit of the multiple dwelling group residents. And also something I think I'd mentioned to John that I'm not sure, so they're single-family homes, whether those are going to be just standalone single-family homes, or if they were going to fall under the patio home category, which is really, I guess, more of an architectural type question. Those would also be then part of that multiple dwelling group, so then it would be the whole entire development might be considered a multiple dwelling versus only the two-family. But I'm not sure that there's been any.
The single families would be standalone single-family homes. And then the duplex units, pretty much automatically, a condominium association is formed on the lot. So that's where you get your common area retained on those lots for the duplex units.
for each of the lots that have duplexes.
Correct.
Would have a separate agreement.
That's correct.
Can you, without having the plans in front of us, give me an idea of where you needed to shift duplexes and single family units?
Yeah, it was actually fairly simple. I think you have the old one. So lot
Thank you.
9 on the corner there, on the southern corner, I'll say, basically became a duplex, and lot 4 became a single family. And then there was some slight shifting, maybe 5 feet either way of property lines, and everybody meets the requirements. So you don't have, a single-family lot is no less than 10,000. I think the smallest one is 11,150 square feet. And the largest, or the smallest duplex lot is 15,200 square feet. No. No.
One of the other things we had talked about was the parking and dwellings.
Yes.
That could be allowed, but it looks like there's still some single-family that have it, so I'm not sure whether you're proposing less of a front yard setback for those, or if that's something that's still going to be worked out. I think it
That's
was
what we're
lot
working out
5.
currently right now with the architect, but it looks like each unit will have 2-car garage. So the code allows for a driveway entrance to be in the front yard and a turnaround, as long as both vehicles would be able to use a 2-car garage. So all of the units, whether it's single-family or duplex, will have a 2-car garage.
Okay, so that's what's shown.
Correct. Yeah, this is a little older version. But everything else has stayed the same. The open space area, the cul-de-sac, the length of the cul-de-sac, the design, it was basically internally, the areas that were already delineated for those lots have just been shifted around to provide the requisite square footages.
As memory serves, one of the conversations in relation to visual impact of the development, because it sits on this high ridge, so to speak, was to try and keep the duplexes along the back portion of the cul-de-sac to try and pull them away from the more easily visible areas. Was there no way to accomplish that by leaving? I know we were talking about the one duplex and the one single family up front, so to speak. there was no way to accomplish that through shifting of lots and leave that duplex in the back?
The only way would be to make the open space area smaller, and we didn't want to do that. So the least intrusive way was to switch the two.
Give me a rough idea then of the difference in the size differential between a single family, well, like the single family on lot 9 and the duplex on lot 8.
Sorry, George. Those are being worked out, but I think the single family is approximately about 25 to 30% smaller footprint than the duplex. But we'll have the square footages, the exact square footages at their next submission, because I will actually have the renderings and the footprints for you to look at.
And by doing it this way, it allows you to leave the maximum amount of open space
Correct.
that you had designed,
Yeah.
which is what you're working on addressing with the ZBA, correct? You're still in the process of that?
That is correct.
Okay. So do we want to have
I just
a
wanted to say that
discussion about
for the record-
duplex versus, yeah.
Yeah, when we first talked about the cul-de-sac, of the cluster development and the concept of how many houses this property could support, I was really thinking that this would be one building per lot, and each building would support a single family, and I did not realize that you could have on my part. Sorry, I was trying to look at the drawing. I was
I know,
just,
but your light goes off and then we can't hear anything.
did you want me to repeat what I said?
Yes, please.
I said when I first reviewed this and we considered the concept of a cluster development, I went under the notion that it would be each lot would have one building and each building could support one single family. And I did not realize that we could have duplex buildings.
Under the cluster regulation that you're looking to try and meet here, does the lot size for a duplex need to be twice the size of a lot size for a single-family home?
No.
And I'm sorry, so what's the differential there, if I may, if you know?
The minimum lot size for a duplex under the code is 7,500 square feet in this zone.
And for a single-family?
It's at the discretion of the planning board during the cluster review, but we held 10,000. So basically, what you do your conventional based on the 10,000,
Right?
and then when we shift to cluster, the board has the ability to reduce the size of the lots if you so choose, if it's in the benefit. I don't think any lot can be smaller than 7,500, but that would be up to the board to decide whether the cluster was more beneficial to have smaller lots. But we held the minimum, we held the 10,000, so there's no request for a reduction.
So am I clear that that's true both on the lots with the single-family homes and on the duplexes?
That's correct,
Okay.
that's correct.
Well, I thought, just looking, I know that the cluster allows you to reduce the lot size for the single-family home to 7,500. I don't believe there's a corresponding provision for duplex.
I think it was under the multiple, the paragraph with the multiple dwellings, I think it said that it had to be supported on a 7,500 square foot common lot line is what it was for that. Correct. That's correct. Correct.
Okay, I thought you,
Oh, not the whole one, half, yes.
Lisa, Jason, questions, comments? Okay. And I'm generally okay with a combination of single-family homes and duplexes. I feel like in this particular property, it serves the purpose. I think it's going to allow us to, although they're duplexes and it's 15 units, the total number of buildings will be reduced that way, which I would expect would possibly minimize the coverage on the lot, and I think it's certainly allowing us to maximize the amount of open space that you're able to achieve there. And through that, probably the vegetative cover in the outer areas of the development, that'll help with the visual screening that I know we've been concerned about overall. I know it's a concern of mine.
So can we have the applicant summarize where we're at with the bulk table and the lots?
That's what we're preparing for you now, is basically a final cluster subdivision plan. But these lots all provide for 25-foot front yard setback, 15-foot side yard setbacks, and 35-foot rear yard on lots 6, 7, 8, 9, and a 25-foot setback along, 25-foot rear yard along the easement.
That then the only reduction in the setbacks is the 25 rear for,
That's correct. And that, this layout has been kicked around now for a little while now. It's been probably close to 6 months. And we actually were looking at one point in time between the board and the applicant was if we could do actually 3-family here. But when we approached the highway superintendent, one of his requirements was he didn't want to see 3-family up there if possible. So that's kind of how we ended up with this mix of 1s and 2s. But that was always, our thought is this was the right direction that we were moving in.
Right, I remember that he had brought up,
Yes.
not only from a highway perspective, but from a fire protection
correct.
perspective,
Exactly.
duplexes would be workable.
Yes.
3 families he had some distinct concerns about.
Correct.
Okay, so if I can jump back to our consultants. Sean, anything you want to review in relation to where we're at right now? Thank you. Ashley?
yes, so you did assume lead agency status at the last meeting on December 10th. And the purpose of this meeting was to discuss that part EAF, the Part 2 form, and to discuss what kind of other studies or analyses you might need in order to come to a determination of significance, which is something you'll have to do as the lead agency for this project.
Okay, so would you be leading us through the Part 2 as far as going through question by question?
If that's, yeah, I mean, if that's what you want to, it's up there on the screen. I don't know if everyone has copies, but we could just kind of walk through that, and then if there's,
I think that would be the way to go, right? It's been more, we certainly can tonight, it's been more than 30 days, and we should get that moving, right? So we can,
yeah, so I don't envision you being able to make a determination of significance, but just to start going through these questions, telling the applicant what else you need, and it would be what's known as the expanded Part 3 process, where before you make the determination, there's going to be additional submissions and mentioned landscaping plan, visual analysis, that type of stuff that would be submitted before you could actually complete this form, but we could start definitely going through that to see what those other things might be. So the first question, is there going to be an impact on land? So obviously the action's going to involve construction on land, so that question would be yes, and then you go through the subpoints. Whether the action may involve construction on land where depth to the water table is less than 3 feet. And if you see on the Part 2, it refers you back to where on the Part 1 you could look for information on that. Not prepared any proposed Part 2, because I believe the plan was to just go through it as the board, so
okay.
some of these more specific ones, I'm not sure whether
I'm not sure if we have,
you want to belabor that, yeah. Are there any, I mean, maybe we could just do section by section, and
I
the
think-
board could pick out things that they,
Yeah, as far as, you mean as far as the sub-issues under each question, if there's anything that we particularly want
It's
to
out
question
to you
tonight.
going to be in phases, or is it going to be constructed all?
All at once.
So the questions about erosion, sediment control, that type of stuff, obviously, there's going to be a SWIP.
Correct.
So that's something that'll need to be submitted. It's going to be required because of the amount of disturbance.
Okay, so the next section. That's impact on geological features.
I don't believe questions are filled. That would be no, because there's surface water. I don't believe there's any wetlands on or on adjacent properties. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that would be no. Moving along to question 4, the impact on,
Can I just ask a question about that? And
Sure.
Again, I'm not sure if it's applicable or not. But the property is uphill and drains down across Arico Terrace and then downhill across 208 and then down to the Orange and Rockland Lakes. It definitely, all that land back there all the way up the hill definitely feeds into those lakes. So are any of the issues brought up in Section 3, would that relate to that? Or is this really how the water that's on the property would be affected? I guess that's what I'm just trying to...
that could be, it's whether the proposed action may affect one or more wetlands or other surface water bodies. So if there's potentially an impact to that water body from the stormwater, from the runoff, that's something, and I don't know whether that's been looked into at all.
Well, that'll be addressed within the SWIP. So as
Okay.
part of our stormwater
Yep.
pollution prevention plan, there's 2 parts to it. There's a quality section and there's a quantity section that we have to meet. The quantity section requires us to meet pre-development levels with runoff from the property. So there won't be any net increase in runoff after the development because we're going to be implementing stormwater management practices. Okay. The second part of the component of the SWIP is the quality portion of it. That's through the DEC, through the stormwater speedies permit. There are regulations that we have to meet in order to get that permit to treat stormwater on the site. So there'll be filtering practices or infiltrating practices or however we get that designed to be final. So all that's handled on an on-site basis. And normally what that reflects in is you have an approved SWIP plan that will treat that on-site and then releases that to whatever the next downstream water body is. So if you meet the requirements on your site, you're usually not impacting something downstream of your site.
And from what I remember about how you're generally planning on grading the site, ultimately I would think that the water is going to run away from that body of water
That's correct.
on the developed part of the site, that the downhill slope is mostly going to be part of the open lands.
That's
And
correct.
is going to be, protected from erosion and there'll be soil absorption as you go down the hill, just as there is right now, because effectively you're going to leave it untouched. So there
you're
probably
prob-
won't be a huge difference, but I just didn't know.
Yeah, well, you don't because we haven't finished the report yet, so.
Right.
But towards Arico Terrace, you'll probably have less water because the water going there now will be effectively cut off by the road, and it's going to be redirected down the road to where we show on the map right now is just stormwater management area. And that facility will be designed to the state standards to handle your quality and your quantity.
Okay, so that
And
sounds like,
question 3
it sounds
would
like a
be-
no?
So I think question 3, you would answer that initial question, yes, that there may be an effect, and then you'll have to, see what the analysis shows to confirm that none of those subs would be moderate to large. Question 4, that would be, yes, there's going to be additional use of groundwater. And I know that was touched on a little, that they're going to be putting together some well testing, is that?
That's correct.
So that would be reviewed then by or done in conjunction with your hydrogeologist consultant to develop a plan, and that type of information is going to be needed to. Also, this possible pollutant groundwater as a commercial action and that, so I think this question is going to really be looking to the actual water supply and any potential demands there.
Excuse me, Sean, is your mic working?
So section 5, impact on flooding.
Flooding, so that this
Can be in a floodplain.
floodplain,
It's not in any flood plains, but I think, I don't want to speak, but I think you'll answer yes. This will tie back to the SWIP as well, the stormwater plan, because, you're changing flows and patterns, so we'll have to prove that, there's no impact to that. So I think my opinion would be a yes, but the SWIP will mitigate those.
Yeah. Sense.
on number 6, proposed action may include Can you hear me, George? Oh. Maybe it's too far away, is that, okay. So we were just on question number 6 on the form, and that would be answered no. There's no proposed state-regulated air or emission source. The next question is impact on plants and animals. So the proposed action may result in the loss of flora or fauna. Typically would be a yes. There's going to be some change there. I'm trying to look and see whether you had a tree cutting restriction for bats or anything like that, and I don't. Yeah, you do have threatened species. Cut off here, but I think it's the Indiana bat and the northern long-eared bat. So that's something that typically could be handled, but, well, the trees are pretty much, are there any trees that would be cut down still, or?
No.
Even along where the road meets up with the village road, there's no trees at the tree line, well, at the property line there?
I don't think there's any significant tree in that 50-foot right-of-way.
Okay.
But I'll double check it. Even if there was, we would basically just employ that we can't cut trees between, basically now, the summer months, so you got from March 31 to November 1.
Right, you have the seasonality of
That's
it.
right. You cut during the winter.
Right. Okay, number 8, agricultural resources. No.
Number 9, impact on aesthetic resources. So whether the proposed action is obviously different from or in sharp contrast to current land use patterns between the proposed project and a scenic or aesthetic resource. So if there's any aesthetic resource that's within, EAF asks if there's one within 5 miles. I don't know whether anything was identified on the EAF or if anyone's aware of something that would.
I think on the EAF, I think it's the Heritage Trails within 5
Heritage
miles.
Trails.
But we're going to do the visual cross-section through anyway. I don't think you can see this property from the trail, but, you'll have the visual, that cross-section from 208 and Scunnamunk intersection up. That's the one that we're working on.
I think that's the main visual impact. I think there will be some from coming up Orange and Rockland Road from the directions of the park and ride. I would imagine you would see those up on the, although maybe not. I don't know. They might sit back far enough
Yeah,
when you get to the top and it comes down. I'm just not sure how much further down the opening, once you get to the top of that, it might be hidden by that.
Yeah, we can definitely take a look at that. And that's the whole point, is they'll flush that out, so.
Right, I mean, I don't know if that would qualify, I just know Orange and Rockland lakes are used recreationally, and there's the town park there across 208 at the bottom of the hill.
Yep, at the bottom, yeah.
Which, when we get out of COVID, we'll go back into. It was really getting used for the first time in the 20 years I've lived across from there, and it was exciting, and then we had to close them down. But they'll be back.
Are you already, you've been working on a visual analysis, or you're
Yeah.
going to be doing, so are there any
Yeah,
parameters the board wants to discuss, at this point? I know John mentioned landscaping, that's obviously, a landscaping plan's gonna have to be submitted, cross-sections, things like that, the
Yeah,
the height of the buildings
The
and
only
the,
significant cross-section we're working on right now is the 208 Scunny-Monk view, from the intersection looking
Yeah,
up.
that is the most significant one.
That's the
for
only one
sure.
that we've identified in common. If there are others that you'd like to see, let me know now, so we can just include that.
I guess I would just take a look at it from the perspective of the Orange and Rockland Park there, at the intersection of Orange and Rockland Road, 208, across from the end of Arico Terrace.
Which is, it's easy enough to do, because they did the drone footage, and I have the 3D,
Right.
so that's easy enough.
Okay. I think you're right. I don't think you'd see it from the Heritage Trail.
No, and the closer you get, the less you see, because, we're going,
Right.
going up this thing, so, yeah.
And that may be the case with the park, especially since it sits down low, the majority of it.
Yeah, well, we'll get that lined up.
So will we move on to historic and archaeological resources?
don't believe there was any historic, but there was actually, I'm sorry, archaeological. So SHPO will have to be, have you been in contact with the SHPO on the project?
Yes.
Did you receive anything?
We haven't received anything yet. We
Okay.
uploaded the project to the CRIS system, or whatever their acronym
Okay.
is now. Yes,
SHPO determination.
correct. Yeah, the stormwater will trigger it as well. Correct, Sean.
Okay, so we're going to be looking at that anyway.
Moving on to number 11, open space and recreation, and I think, Jeff, you touched on that a little bit with the discussion to the aesthetic resources. But this isn't going to result in any loss of recreational activities. So that would be a no. Transportation, so whether there's going to be an increase in traffic, that's where this is going to evaluate that. So number 13 would be a yes, and then, looking at these sub-questions, I'm not sure if there's anything you want to see.
I'm sorry, we're on number 12? Still, or,
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I must have skipped over 12. I'm sorry. 12 would be a no. They're not located in a critical environment area.
would you mind for the board, or at least for me, can you define what a critical environmental area is?
The So critical environment areas are specific locations in a town, a village, or city, county, or the state that have a special designation because they have one or more of the following unique characteristics. They're a benefit or a threat to human health. They have an important or unique natural setting, a special fish and wildlife habitat, special species, something like that, special vegetation. They hold important agricultural, social, cultural, historic, archaeological, recreational, or educational values, or they have an inherent ecological, geological, or hydrological sensitivity that may be adversely affected by any change. So sometimes it's the local government, here would be the town board, that designates these types of areas within the town. The state could designate them as well. So the DEC, in completing the EAF, the DEC has a database where it would pick up if there's any known on that database through that that mapper application.
Thank you.
Number 13, again, that's the impact on transportation, so any traffic impacts.
Well, there'd be an impact on traffic. The question is just how large it's going to be. I know one of the things that Bonnie mentioned was, I don't want to say a concern, but wanting to take into consideration not only the development, but how that's going to interplay with the houses or whatever is developed along the portion of the road that's in the village. Which, if I remember correctly, John, you'd mentioned that's 2 lots off of that road in the
Yes.
village section, at least currently.
2 lots, yes.
Okay. Do you know if those are single-family or multifamily homes?
I don't know. I believe they're singles, but I'm not 100% sure.
I mean, that might be just something we want to take into consideration if they were, for example, 3-family homes. I think there are 3 relatively new homes along Scunnamunk that are 3-family, so I'm thinking it's possible that there might be as many as 3-family homes off of that road, but I don't know the answer to that either.
Yeah, I don't think they're 3s, if anything, then maybe 2s, but I think they're singles. I think there was 2 single-family lots.
Well, just the answer to that question will obviously have an impact on traffic coming off of that road and the interplay between the town and the village and all that good stuff. So I think we ought to take that at least into consideration.
Any analysis you would want on, as far as any traffic, how that might deal with the specific roadway, the existing road network, so that would take into consideration the existing development, any proposed development in the area. Number 14, impact on energy. The proposed action may increase in the use of any form of energy. So that would be yes, they're going to be using more energy for these residences, but I don't believe there's anything that would come to one of those thresholds that's under. I don't believe there's anything that would reach any of those thresholds discussed below.
So 15 is impact on noise, odor, or light. What kind of, if any, other than outdoor post lights or, lights on the house are being considered? Will there be street lights?
I was going to propose one street light at the end of the cul-de-sac. But if the board wants street lights along the rest of it, we will certainly add that, but I was just proposing the one at the end of the cul-de-sac. Seems to be what's typical, throughout the town.
Especially recently with the reevaluation of lighting along town roads and that sort of thing. Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah.
Because you have a turnaround situation.
Correct. And there's also no real house on that one end. It's the open space land, so you want to keep that a little bit illuminated. So typically, we usually do the end of the cul-de-sac, and then the lots will have, typical residential lighting. That's all.
Right.
Submitting a lighting plan with your visual analysis?
Yes, we'll put that fixture on. We'll show the foot candles on it.
To accomplish your grading, are you expecting any blasting to be required?
I'm not, because we're raising the grade of that road, so I don't expect our cuts to be that significant to require any blasting.
More building up than cutting in general.
It's a balance between the two. We're cutting down, but I don't think we're not cutting down deep enough to warrant blasting. They'll basically, if they run into it, it's shale, they'll chip it away. They won't blast.
Number 16 is impact on human health. Proposed action may have an impact on human health from exposure to new or existing sources of contaminants, and that would be no. I don't believe there was anything identified. And anyone, if anyone has anything to add, of course, just jump in. Number 17 is the proposed action is not consistent with adopted land use plans. So it's a double negative kind of there. It's an odd phrasing, but it's asking basically whether the project fits within the town zoning, the town's comprehensive plan, whether if it's not consistent with that, then that could potentially be an impact.
So because to achieve the cluster development, the applicant needs to go past the zoning board to get a variance, would we have to say at that point that it's not completely consistent with community plans?
Yeah, so if it does require a variance, then it would be, you would answer yes, but then evaluate, whether the magnitude or how large that impact of that need for a variance is.
I mean, I think it's worth looking at. I mean, I think the flip side of that is it's an attempt to achieve cluster development, which is certainly consistent with our comprehensive plan. So, you can kind of come at that from both angles. But I think we ought to just look at how consistent or inconsistent that is with our overall plans, our zoning, our regulations, all those things. Consistent with community character.
Whether the proposed project is inconsistent with the existing community character. So if you look at the sub-questions, that kind of gives you the idea of what they're getting at with this question, whether it's replacing or eliminating existing facilities of historic importance, if it's going to create a demand for additional community services, which of course any new development would in some respect, but whether that's then a small impact or a larger one. How it fits within the predominant architectural scale and character. I mean, that's something that could be addressed with the visual impacts.
Yeah, honestly, I think that's the biggest part to be determined is that, it really is going to depend on the look of the development and how consistent it is with the rest of the community. Like you said, it will create some additional demand, but we're talking about 15 units. Every time development happens, there will be some, but I think we're talking about relatively a small portion of that. For example, I don't think the state police are going to put on an additional car because 15 more houses are developed in the town of Monroe. I wouldn't complain if they did, but, I don't think it's going to happen. That's fine.
I think for that one, the most relevant ones to this project would be the last two, E and F, looking to the predominant architectural scale and then also the existing natural landscape, which really tie into the visual.
Board members, is there anything that we just discussed in relation to the EAF that you have a question about, a particular concern about, something that you think maybe we've misidentified as either something that is potentially something we really need to look into on a greater level, or where we've decided there doesn't appear to be a significant impact?
I have a question on number 16.
Thank you.
Letter A, the proposed action is located of a school, hospital, licensed daycare center, group home. So just on North Main, the synagogue is there, and there's children's toys outside, so that does appear to be a daycare center. We know North Main Elementary School is not that far down the road from that location. So as far as the measurement would be, what is the question the action may have an impact? Exposure or existing source of contaminants. So are we saying there's no contaminants, or what could bug up with the project?
Just move your mic a little closer. It's cutting
Sure.
in and out.
I'm trying to get red.
Better, thank you. So Ashley, can you tell us a little bit more about
Sure,
what
so
that
I'm just
particular
pulling
sub
up,
is? Thank you.
And typically that would be, that question comes up if it's a site that was undergoing remediation, if there was some kind of spill that's an oil spill, something like that. If it used to be a property that used to be a gas station, and that when you dig stuff up, there's a potential that there's going to be any type of contaminants that might then impact the nearby school or anything like that. And I don't believe there was anything in that respect.
The other one, like B on this one, says the site of the proposed action is currently undergoing remediation. So, if we continue to go down the line with the letters here, it does kind of point to, is it under investigation or is there known? So I just wanted to clarify, that part of it. Where the firehouse is on the corner of 208, where Scunnamunk and 208 and North Main meet, used to be a daycare. I'm not sure if that's operational either. So there's three.
That's no longer operational.
Okay,
but
so there was a few
I thought of that
areas
too.
that we could say maybe are within this 15 feet or very close to it. So that was just my question, my little concern.
What do we know about the historical use of the land there? Anything?
As far as I know, it's been used as the power line, and the rest of the property's been vacant. It's just empty land. This also ties into the proposed use of your property. So if we were proposing, an industrial manufacturing facility that had, chemical, whatever the case may be, that ties into this question more so, as well as the prior of the use of the property. So like Ashley was saying, if it was a gas station or if it was, an old factory or something, you would be concerned about that. Or if I was proposing a factory here or some processing plant that would have emissions or, byproduct of waste or something like that, that's why they want to know, are there any other areas that have children or the elderly in proximity to that type of use? But,
Thank you, I appreciate it.
yeah.
EAF also pulls from the DEC's database for any potential spills or, that are nearby. And I don't believe any were flagged on the EAF as part of, that review. So.
Honestly, it looks like, if anything, that land at one time, a long, long time ago, had some kind of agricultural use, as did most land in this area.
I ask about the transportation impact. It is close to that intersection, which is congested. And
Which, that's number 13?
Number 13.
Thank you.
Near that traffic light by the firehouse. I know that area can get backed up.
That intersection is certainly an area of concern for the village, having spoken to them about that, and the village board, and it's certainly concern about any of the areas of the town that are served off of that intersection. So I would agree with that, and I think we're certainly would say that that's an area that needs to be looked at more. In relation to the road network, I'm not so sure that there's any significant change in, how that would affect pedestrian or bicycle traffic. There is some in that intersection and up and down Scunnamunk Road. It's fairly minimal. But I don't think that, this development's going to have a significant impact on that one way or the other. There may be a small increase. I think it's the automotive traffic that's our
Could be
biggest issue.
difficulties with egress and ingress to that.
Do you know how close the entrance to the cul-de-sac is from that intersection that we're talking about, the 208 Scunnamunk, North Main?
1 second. You're probably about 450 feet away.
And if cars are stopped at the light, which I've noticed now has striping on it that you can't come all the way. If you're on Scunnamunk, there's maybe 100 feet that cars are back. And then is there a possibility that people wouldn't be able to get out because the cars are backed up there?
Well, what'll happen is at your peak times, if somebody's trying to get out, if it's backed up, they'll wait. But the level of service, we'll give you an analysis that'll prove that will probably not affect the level of service at the intersection, because our counts will be very low. I mean, we're 15 units, so we're not going to be adding a tremendous amount of additional trips to that intersection. So it's probably not going to be enough to move the needle on that functionality there. I think there's been some significant improvements there with the arrows and the striping, and it'll just be a function of our driveway, someone having to wait through a cycle of the light to get out. But we'll put together a synopsis of that. We'll give you the trip generation of what we're going to generate. We'll compare that to what's going on at the intersection, and that'll show you the footprint there. I don't think that's going to, just because of the number of units we have, I don't think it's going to rise to the level of any sort of significant improvement that's going to do anything with that. If I had 50 units or something, I'd be less inclined to say that, but so I think that's what I'll have. But we'll give you that data.
Any other areas anyone would like to question or address? Okay, good as well. Anything else that we cover then this evening in relation to DG, or do we have a step forward at this point?
Where are we
Until we
with
get
the,
there.
did they go before ZBA yet?
Well,
We applied to the ZBA, we did an initial presentation to them, and I said that we would return once this cluster layout got a little further along, just in case something comes up. We applied for the variances exactly on the map that you have it, but if something changed, for instance, even if the area increased, the variances that need to match. So I left it with the ZBA that we would return when this got a little further along in the design.
would you expect that you'll be back here before the planning board next, or before the ZBA?
I would like to come before the planning board, because you're doing the joint, basically a joint review, meaning
Right.
the ZBA can't act until you guys have acted. So I would like to get these studies completed, I'd like to get them reviewed, and get on a much sturdier footing so that there's no surprises. And then I'll do the dual track with the ZBA and go through that process. And it's at our risk solely, because if we end up not getting the variance, we've done all that work, and we recognize that.
Right. And it sounds like you'll also have to us those further refined plans, updated from what you discussed, but also some of the visuals and some of the other things that we can take a look at to get an even better idea of what it is you're proposing.
That's correct.
Okay?
Correct.
Any other questions? Anything else from our consultants? Okay,
All right.
then I think we're good for tonight. Thank you, John.
Very good. Thank you. Happy belated New Year.
And to you.
Stay well.
Okay, so next, if I could bring up the representative for Verizon Wireless.
Oh, actually, I heard from the attorney for Verizon Wireless, and he did not realize that the meeting was in person.
Oh.
So he is unable to attend. So tonight, I would ask just that the board approve the extension of the shot clock until April 26th, I believe. Yeah, agree to extend the shot clock until April 26th and authorize me to sign a letter agreement in that regard. So basically, just to give the board a little update, the applicant had to go before the ZBA for a use variance. So they did obtain that use variance. They were back before you. I think they may have came to a meeting, but they were still working out their plans. So there really hasn't been anything substantive submitted or reviewed at a meeting by the board. So right now, we still need more time to review it, obviously, and then approve it. So federal law says you only have a set amount of time, the shot clock. So that's why I'm asking that you do agree to extend that into April 26th. And then hopefully at the next meeting, they'll be able to be here.
Also, with regard to Verizon, there was a few technical comments that I had in my comment for this evening. Heard those comments with Verizon's applicant, so they.
Please do, and would you mind just reviewing them quickly while we're
Sure.
on the topic, so we're all on the same page? Is that an issue?
I mean,
with
it's always best to not discuss the application in substance without the
Okay.
applicant here, but if do you want to just, read through Sean's comments? I don't know if anyone has a question. I mean, they're going to be shared with the applicant anyway, and they could always be watching, but if you want him to just do maybe a summary in case anyone has a question, but I think it definitely makes sense to share those.
Okay, well, that's fine. Did everyone have a chance to take a look at Sean's comments in relation to that?
So the first comment just notes some of the items that the ZBA wants the planning board to address with the applicant with regard to, the substance on the plan. So we want, looking at the zoning side, the cover page identifies that the location is in the HI zone. It's actually in the LI. The zoning bulk table wasn't included. It didn't appear that any of the dimensions were lacking, but they should be identified. I was suggesting a note in number 4 with regard to one of the sections of the town code that, maybe the applicant. There was a mistake in the labeling of the municipal boundary around the lot, and then a potential for an access easement for the road that Verizon will be.
In number 5, when you're mentioning the incorrectly identified municipal boundary, is that where, I guess along the back, the boundary along the back side of the water tower, it's labeled Curious Joel, but it's really town of Monroe back there?
It's still the town of Monroe, so there is no
It's all
boundary.
town of Monroe.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep. So there is no actual municipal boundary there.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't sure about that one myself. I didn't think that was that, but okay. Thank you for clarifying that for me.
So I'll share these with the, the applicant.
Okay. So I'd like to make a motion that we authorize Ashley to enter into an agreement with Verizon Wireless to extend the shot clock through April 26th. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jason. May I have a roll call vote?
Aye.
Manson, aye.
Vaccaro, aye.
Wait, aye.
Thank you very much. Anything else we need to cover in relation to that then, Ashley, or
No, that's it. Thank you.
Fantastic. So moving on to Harriman Business Park. Good evening. If for the record, you'd please reintroduce yourself and again give us a summary of where we're at this time.
I'm Nate Burns from Langen Engineering. I'm the landscape architect representing the applicant.
I'm Marissa Weiss from Jacobowitz and Gubitz. I am covering this evening for Mr. Lifko, who you've seen
Marissa,
previously.
can you pull the mic in?
Yeah, sure. The masks, I hate it. Can you hear me now? Better?
George, is that?
Better? Better. Okay.
Thank you.
Marissa Weiss of Jacobowitz and Gubitz. I'm covering this evening for Mr. George Lifko.
Thank you. Welcome. Okay, so Nate, if you'd like to
Sure.
bring us back up to date.
If I can remind the board, when we were in front of you last, I believe last year, we had addressed all of the comments in terms of the retail B1 outdoor patio expansion, except for minor comments we received from the Environmental Commission on the replanting of the 12 replacement trees required for the 12 trees which are going to be removed. We addressed those comments and supplied that updated plan to the board for review, and are here again seeking final approval on this. I discussed with the applicant, and it is their intent to go out and plant this plant material once they receive final approval prior to drawing their building permit, and their preference would be to have this, as part of the approvals, to have planting of this plant material a condition of building approval, or building permit approval. So they intended to go out as soon as weather is suitable, plant this, and then come back later and pull their building permit.
Okay, and then how would that be, I guess, certified for the building inspector when so you would know that that condition was met?
Certainly. We would provide, when the work is done, we would provide a letter certifying the work was completed in accordance with the plans to the town, and then, if the town wishes to review it at that point, or, have the building inspector go out and yeah, certainly, if the town wishes to go out and inspect the work, or is fine with our letter, that's fine.
Okay. Sean, any comments in regard to this portion of the application?
I don't have any technical comments. One thing I would offer, if the trees are going to be planted prior to the issuance of a building permit, if Ben or the planning board wanted our office to go and review to make sure that the trees were planted prior to the issuance of the building permit, that's something, the board could consider as a condition.
Ashley?
Yes, so I did speak a little bit with George and Marissa about the condition for the trees. So originally, we were proposing that the applicant would post a performance bond, but now they're saying that they want to just install them definitely before issuing the permit. So I would propose that you could have a condition that would be prior to the issuance of a building permit for any of the work in the outside patio area, the applicant has to install the replacement trees and would be required to post any required inspection fees and maintenance bond at that time. Standard condition that the bond would be in the satisfactory to the town board, town engineer, and town attorney as to form, sufficiency, manner of execution, and surety. So that would be a maintenance bond to allow the trees to remain in place for a minimum of 1 year after they are planted to ensure that they are alive and thriving. So there wouldn't be a requirement for the performance bond. It would be this maintenance bond and the requirement that the trees do have to be installed, though, before they could be issued a building permit. If that was a mouthful for you.
Well, yeah, a little bit, but, okay, so by making that a condition of the building permit being issued, what we're basically saying is it sort of negates the need for the performance bond because you've proven performance
Exactly.
in a way that the planning board has prescribed or agreed upon, whether that's Sean going out, whether that's acceptance of the letter from the landscape architect, building inspector going out and visually inspecting that if they wanted to. Whatever we decide that would be, then we just wouldn't have to get into the bonding issue for that. There's no issue over the maintenance bond. No. It didn't sound like that from what I read. So how does that sound to the board?
I think it sounds fair. Just minor comment, I don't know if this was reviewed, but it may go a long way for protecting the trees if you have tree guards on them for deer protection from antler rubbing.
They're evergreen trees, and deer can't rub evergreen trees because they have branches all the way to the ground.
If I remember correctly, on the suggestion from the Conservation Committee, there was a reevaluation of the trees that we're anticipating planting, and one of the reasons was for the best deer resistance. Okay.
Yeah.
Was that correct?
We installed the species of trees at the mix that was recommended by the Conservation Committee.
Thank you.
I mean, it almost sounds to me like this is a better option than the performance bond. If the trees don't get planted, you can't do anything else. And certainly we'd all like to see this, happen. So
There was one other condition too that we
Yeah.
had discussed, that it would be, the trees can't be removed until they obtain a building permit for that outdoor patio area. So that would be part of the building permit process, is where the trees can't be taken down and then they don't follow through with that work. And I don't think that was an issue.
if I remember from what I've read so far, what was presented for this meeting, there's an issue of possibly wanting to get moving on the interior of the site prior to being able to complete the work on the exterior.
That's my understanding. That way, the applicant would be able to start work on the actual building itself without starting that outdoor patio work.
Does that involve two separate building permits? Is that how that works?
Yes.
Does it always work that way, or is that something we're talking about agreeing to in this situation?
That's a question for Ben, how he would handle the building permit, but my understanding is there would be one for the interior and then a separate one for the exterior.
Yeah, that's how I'm understanding it as well. And they wouldn't be able to do any work or get a permit for any work outside until they comply with the trees.
The tree portion, and that all is predicated on us granting final approval of this update to the plan. Okay. How do we feel about that? I think it sounds reasonable to all of us. So what would be our next step here, Ashley?
A motion to approve the tree replacement plan conditioned on the following. One, that no trees in the outdoor patio area shall be removed until the applicant obtains a building permit for the outside patio area. And then two, the applicant shall install the replacement trees prior to the issuance of a building permit for construction of the outside patio area, and shall post a maintenance guarantee in amount to be fixed by the town board upon recommendation of the town engineer, in place for a minimum of 1 year after all new trees or replacements, if necessary, are planted to ensure such plantings are alive and thriving.
So is this something that you need to get down on paper first, or is it something we can take action on tonight if we're so inclined?
Take action tonight. It could just be done by a motion.
Okay, so I'd like to ask someone to make a motion that we, you have a comment, Ward, in relation to the Conservation Committee?
He's coming to get a mic, I think.
Our Conservation Commission.
Thank you.
Just to make a recommendation that 1 year after planting, you either get an arborist or a certified tree grower to get an estimate of the condition of the plants. Someone with some expertise to be able to analyze whether the trees are doing well or they're not doing well. If they're not doing well, then we should replace them. But a year's time is adequate to do that, but there ought to be someone with some kind of expertise.
To kind of follow up on that, I was going to update the board after this applicant, but our office has been in contact with Karen Arndt, who's a landscape architect who's working on the Monroe Commons project. We're going to have her work with our office to review future applications regarding landscape plans. Perhaps she could be the one to review that as a condition at the time of the release of the maintenance. Recommend that be released.
That sounds good.
Thank you, Ward. Would that be amenable to the applicant? Is there a concern about that?
No, I don't see why there would be.
I mean, that was just sort of all, it seems to me like it would be hand in hand with, the fact that you've got the maintenance bond anyway, and if there's an issue with the trees, it's going to be dealt with. We're just going to evaluate how they took to the area. But I think based on your plan, Nate, you sounded pretty optimistic about, the kinds of trees, certainly all along that strip, you'd done other plantings, and those have worked out successfully so far.
Yes.
So, okay.
If I could I'll just read again clearly for the record, because I
Thank
just
you.
changed it just a little bit to cover that inspection. It would be, the first condition would be no trees in the outdoor patio area shall be removed until the applicant obtains a building permit for the outside patio area. And the second, prior to the issuance of a building permit for construction of the outside patio area, the applicant shall install the replacement trees and shall post with the town clerk all required inspection fees and maintenance guarantees in amounts to be fixed by the town board upon recommendation of the town engineer to remain in place for a minimum of 1 year after all new trees or replacements, if necessary, are planted to ensure such plantings are alive and thriving. So I added in there the inspection fees, which would then cover for any outside review.
So would this be considered an amendment to our original approval, or is this an update to that, or is this in addition to that?
So it's in addition to that. Your
Okay.
original approval required as one of its conditions that if the trees were originally going to be relocated somewhere, if they weren't going to be relocated, they're going to be replaced, they had to come back to the board to get approval just of that tree replacement plan. So this is just satisfying a condition of that approval. It's not an amendment.
The only thing I would suggest is that in order to release the maintenance bond, the landscape architect would have to recommend that be released.
So change the end of that, then the maintenance bond to remain in place for a minimum of 1 year after all new trees or replacements, if necessary, are planted to ensure such plantings are alive and thriving. Such maintenance bond shall be released on recommendation of the town's landscape consultant. That makes sense?
Okay, then I'd like to ask someone to make a motion to approve this that we will approve this update to our original our original approval for Harriman Business Park, that we move forward with this update.
Yes, it would be approving the tree plan, the tree replacement plan, subject to those two conditions.
Have such a motion?
I'll make a motion subject to the conditions previously outlined.
Thank you, Jason. May I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Anthony. May I have a roll call vote?
Drowinski, aye.
Manson, aye.
Carroll, aye.
Wait, aye.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Don't have any other late additions to the agenda, so we're going to move on to the minutes portion of our meeting. Ashley and Sean, if... Absolutely.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful night. Congratulations on your reappointment.
Thank you. Yes, it's a pleasure.
I'd like to take a moment to recognize Ashley Torrey as a new partner in her firm. Congratulations on that. Well deserved.
Thank you. Appreciate
you.
that.
Thank Oh, and Sean Ara is now a partner in his firm.
Shareholder, yeah.
Shareholder. Congratulations to both of you.
Congratulations.
And we look forward to another wonderful year. All right, so,
Good night, Ward.
good night, Ward.
Night, Ward.
Okay, so we're looking at the minutes from September 10th. We do have a quorum for that, as everyone was here that night. And if we can just take a minute or two to look over that, see if we have any updates, corrections to discuss. Good night.
Careful going out there, it looks dark.
This was the meeting where, during the public hearing portion, you had to provide a verbatim to the, okay.
I was told to do verbatim, and then I was told because we had a stenographer, I didn't have to, but I had already spent 3 days.
Have a little more to look at? Okay. Anyone have any comments or questions?
No, I mean, just one really minor typo. On the first paragraph, the third line, I think it says as, it should say has. I'll read it to you.
Which project are you on?
I'm talking about the scoping session, sorry, on page 1 of 6. It says,
Everyone has reviewed? Got it. Sorry, I got the change, has reviewed.
And in particular, Anthony and Jason, you had a chance to review your verbatim comments during the public scoping session?
yes.
I took a look. All right, I took a look at mine as well. Then if I can have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from September 10th, 2020.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. A second, please.
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call vote.
Aye.
Manson, aye.
Vaccaro, aye.
Wait, aye.
Anyone else have any business they need to review tonight? Then I'd like to ask for a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Make a motion, we adjourn tonight's meeting?
Thank you. A second, please. Thank you, Lisa. Roll call vote.
Kowinski, aye.
Manson, aye.
Vaccaro, aye.
Wait, aye.
All right. Thank you very much,
Thank
everyone.
you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Nice job.